Let us return to a time before the world changed. This is not a tale of fantasy. It is the true story of a darkness that swept the earth, a survival tale from medieval England. Prologue: A dying sun. In the spring of the year 1315, the sun vanished behind a curtain of clouds, and for weeks on end, the sky wept. The wind carried no warmth. Rain fell like punishment. What had once been England's green-breasted countryside turned into a black mire of mud and rot. In Yorkshire, where the hills rose like tired backs beneath gray skies, farmers had long looked to May as a time of promise. But this year, promise withered early. Barley seed turned to mush in the ground. Carts sank into sodden fields, and still the rain came. The withering field. Aidan Fletcher, a tenant farmer in the village of Scowl's End, stood barefoot in his barley field, his toes sunk ankle-deep in mud. His ox was dead from lung fever. His wife Maud stood at the cottage door with their youngest son, a sickly child named Tobias, whose ribs showed like broken barrel hoops beneath a linen shift. "We'll try again," Aidan muttered, holding his sack of barley seed. Maud shook her head. "It'll rot again." They had sown that same cursed field 3 times already. Each time the heavens opened and washed the future away. By June, the villagers whispered of God's wrath. They said it was for the sins of the king, or perhaps the pope, or for the people's own gluttony and pride. But pride had long since left Scowl's End. Hunger gnawed louder than prayer. The Sorrowing Sky. Summer, 1315. By midsummer, even the parish priest had stopped preaching of divine punishment. He simply read psalms of suffering from the stone pulpit, hands shaking from hunger. The villagers shared what little they had. Some ground acorns into paste. Others boiled nettles and dandelion leaves. Aidan's daughter Gwen, once sweet-faced and round-cheeked, now walked like an old woman of 13, carrying firewood that weighed more than her hopes. Rats were caught and cooked. Dogs vanished from the lanes. Aidan, a quiet man once known for singing as he reaped, no longer sang. One night, he stole a chicken from the Reeves' coop, and the shame of it ate him more than the meat. "Better a thief than a father burying his son," Maud whispered. But Tobias coughed up blood in late July, and was buried the next day in a grave too shallow to keep the wolves away. The Hungry Land. Autumn, 1315. Autumn brought no relief. What crops had grown were black and waterlogged. Potatoes, cabbages, barley, everything stank of decay. The grain stores in the manor house were guarded now by armed men. The lord of the land, Sir Edwin of Wexford, had locked his gates. "The poor multiply like lice," said one of his men when Aidan went to beg for seed. "You'll eat your own boots before we share what we've sown." And many did. Maud boiled a leather belt once. The smell was foul, but the broth filled their stomachs enough to lull them to sleep. Word came that the famine stretched far beyond their village. In London, bodies piled in the streets. In Lincoln, children were found gnawing on bark. Along the coast, entire fishing villages had disappeared. One evening, a wandering friar arrived, skeletal and shaking. "I bring news from York," he said. "They've begun eating the dead." A winter without end. Winter, 1315, 1316. Snow fell on All Hallows' Eve, and did not melt until Candlemas. Scowl's End became a ghost village. The woods whispered with hollow voices. Fires burned low, as there was little wood left to chop, and less strength to chop it. Aidan and Maud huddled with Gwen and their only surviving son, Wulfric, now 15 and angry. He spoke often of taking food by force. Why should Sir Edwin dine on salted pork while Tobias lies in the ground? "We'll not become beasts," Aidan said. "We hold the line." But what line? Hunger had erased it. In January, Gwen collapsed and never rose again. Her fingers had turned blue. They buried her next to her brother, without ceremony, just a cross of dry twigs and a whisper. The Road to Nowhere, Spring 1316. When the rains returned, they came harder than before. Aidan, Maud, and Wulfric left Scowl's End on foot, their cottage abandoned to rot. They joined the great exodus of the starving, peasants walking roads in silence, begging, stealing, dying in ditches. In Nottingham they found a market guarded by knights. Bread cost a week's wages. Wulfric tried to steal a crust and was nearly hanged. Only a bribe, a pewter ring Maud had hidden, saved him. They walked on. In a monastery near Lincoln, a kindly abbot gave them soup and shelter for a few days. But even the monks were dying. "Half our flock is gone," said the abbot. "God walks with us, but so does death." The mad year, summer 1316. Rain returned like a curse. Entire harvests were again ruined. Maud fell ill from dysentery and died under a tree near Ely. Aidan wept silently and buried her with his own hands, covering her face with earth and promises. Wulfric became distant. He no longer called Aidan father, but referred to him only as old man. He spoke of bandits who raided manors and lived like kings. That summer Wulfric left in the night. Aidan searched for him for weeks, but never found him. He wandered alone, his body frail and bones sharp. He saw cities in ruin, whole churches turned into morgues. In Norwich they were burning corpses in pits. He begged, he wept, he prayed. By the feast of St. Michael, Aidan had walked hundreds of miles. He found himself once again in Yorkshire. A rusted hope. Autumn 1317. In a ruined church outside Ripon, Aidan found shelter. A few survivors gathered, some women, a blacksmith with one eye, a child who would not speak. Together they made a kind of family. They shared what they could. They told stories, not of saints, but of the world before. Feasts, weddings, laughter. In October, for the first time in 3 years, the sky cleared. Aidan planted wild rye near the church. It took root. He wept. By December, the rains slowed. Grain prices dropped slightly. The worst, people said, was over. But for Aidan, survival was not victory. It was grief in motion. Epilogue. The Hollow Harvest. Spring 1318. Aidan died quietly one morning in the ruins of the church. His hands were wrapped around a wooden crucifix. He had lived long enough to see the hunger recede. Wulfric returned 5 years later as a mercenary, hard-faced and cruel, not recognizing the land where his mother and sister lay. He sat beneath a tree and listened to the wind, but it told him nothing. The famine had taken 7 million lives across Europe. But history remembered few names. In Yorkshire, beneath a cross of stone and ivy, lies Aidan Fletcher. He sang once, he sowed what he could, and he held the line. The end. This story represents one of the most brutal periods of medieval survival.